Hello and welcome to the Modernist Society, or as it's actually called, the Modcast. That's
not
right.
Called the Modcast.
Is with your hosts in New York, Jason Mojica, and myself in Chicago, Eric Ottens. About this episode's guest, it can definitely be said, this cat's got skills. It's Thomas Morton.
You'll get that joke eventually.
Maybe get it. Probably not like it.
Yeah.
You sent me a bunch of info and links of Thomas stuff he had written, video clips, all that kind of stuff. And I'm, reading them and scrolling through them. And the one, I'm not going to get the title right, but it was essentially like it let you know like sheep castration with teeth. And I thought, do I want to be the guy that like I have to go like right to that? I have to find like the grossest thing and just make sure I click it and look. And what do I expect to see when I click this? And you see exactly what you expect to see. And I was going to ask him about it, but short of just being like, "Wow, man, that's crazy!" Like I didn't have that much more to really say about it.
Yeah. So yeah, Thomas Morton is one of my favorite people on the planet. I had the pleasure to work with him at Vice, and in fact, he was one of the major reasons I took the job there back in 2011. And by that point, Thomas had already been working at Vice for something like 7 years. He started as an intern and went on to become, to my mind, the most iconic Vice correspondent because, most people you see on TV look like they really want to be on TV, and Thomas certainly did not display that type of energy. B, he talked to the viewer like he would a friend, which is to say with obscure pop cultural references and plenty of gallows humor. And C, he was willing to do pretty much anything, from joining a cult to castrating a sheep with his teeth to getting smuggled into Thailand with a group of North Korean defectors. Just to name a few of his stories / adventures. Thomas and I traveled together for stories in Kurdish Iraq, the West Bank, Israel, South Korea, Laos, Thailand, Kyrgyzstan, and all across West Africa. But, things change, especially in media. And after 15 years on the job, Thomas was let go earlier this year. I wanted to catch up with him, so I took a little motorcycle ride to his place in upstate New York.
Catskills.
It's not the Catskills. I might take these boots off.
I would recommend it. Those are nice. Who make those? What make?
I don't know, like Revzilla something. I mean, but they're like steel toes. Yeah. They're basically motorcycle boots that are meant to look like, boots you could get away with wearing in civilian life. So yeah, we're here in.
Hello there.
Well, where are we?
We're in we're in the village of Catskill, which is not in the Catskills. It's north of it. We're right looking out onto the Hudson River, and across the Hudson is Hudson. So right. I usually get to clarify at least 3 things when I tell people where I live.
And Eric, where are you?
I'm in Chicago. As usual, I got up to do 2 things, ice water and AC, and I almost forgot one of them. My brain, I can't really excuse my brain. That's just like how I am. But I think even my voice might sound tired. I'm not at my peak form today. Jason, you took your shoes off?
I've taken my boots off. I just had
He's debooted.
Took a nice ride up here, up what I read before coming is actually supposedly one of the most dangerous roads in New York.
The Taconic State, is it a parkway? It's a parkway,
yeah.
Right, because you can't take trucks on it.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know why it's so dangerous. I mean, it's the reason I ride it is because it seems the opposite of dangerous, is in that there are no trucks and there are few exits, and
it's windy as hell. There's some insane blind on-ramps that are basically stop signs that you then make starting from 0 miles per hour, you turn onto a 65 mile an hour 2-lane highway, with absolutely from a complete blind turn. I have to take these things off. Oh wait, I'm not gonna be able to hear you.
Hold on, I'm gonna get a quick shot of you.
Let me put the cigarette somewhere.
Why?
Okay.
Is that part of your thing?
It's bad. It's a bad habit.
I think I could sit here taking photos of you lounging all day long.
The light is nice. This is a good place for pictorials. Yeah.
I'm sorry. This entire podcast is just going to be me drooling at Thomas, shirtless in the sun.
Trying to clear up my acne.
I mean, this seems like the beginning of like some shitty profile.
I hope it's the
written
beginning
by,
of something. Yeah.
Right. I mean, where I'm supposed to. I'm really here. Like, I'm the freelancer who's been sent to interview you,
right.
But of course I'm trying to make it about me and also what a good writer I am. So I'm just going to spend a lot of time describing your eyes.
Classic. The questions are 3 times as long as the answers. One of those, the 3 for 3 to 1.
Right.
I always love that.
What's your favorite musician profile of all time?
Oh shit.
Or do you think is the best? Or what's the best and worst? Maybe the worst is easier.
So are you talking about magazine, specifically magazine profiles?
The written word. Yeah.
Like nothing's jumping to mind immediately, but I do love rock bios, and I mean, I guess The Dirt was already a cliche by Neil Strauss and is now even more so since they made a movie of it, which was awesome, by the way.
I liked it.
Yeah, I like book and movie, both good.
It's really hard to dispute that. I think Crazy from the Heat, the David Lee Roth autobiography, which is just a classic example of taping somebody and then transcribing it, which I guess you'd call like an oral personal history or something, maybe, is just a wonderful adventure. I'm trying to remember, I feel like there's a more recent rock book that I absolutely loved. Oh, Brick Smith from The Fall. You know The Fall, right?
Yeah.
So Bricks. She was from Chicago, actually. Are you in Chicago? I've totally forgotten already.
Yeah.
Okay. You are.
Yes, I sure am.
Okay, yeah. So Bricks lived in Chicago by way of Los Angeles, and she was like this really bubbly. I mean, she was a like weird dark musician, but she was also like a bubbly, like very bright, almost platinum blonde, but not dyed blonde. What happened was she got married to Marquis Smith from The Fall and became Brick Smith, and that's when they had a female voice in the band all of a sudden, and they started writing like poppy stuff like CREEP and things like that, and Godbox, L.A., which she wrote, and so she came out with an autobiography, but it's a like great history of the band, and also like it's the weird surrounding scenes like Manchester in the 80s and L.A. in the 80s also, called I think Bricks. What's it called? It's the Brick Smith book. But I'd say that. So it's usually I guess I don't like profiles so much as I like when the musicians tell their own. Like it's better when they're like oral histories are the best. Like Please Kill Me or Meet Me in the Bathroom.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that. If I really like a band, then I can for sure really love reading any book written by probably any member. And even if I don't really love a band, I could probably still make my way through it. Right. I was thinking, the one that came to mind, the guy from the Undertones, Michael Bradley, wrote his book, and he just presents them, I think, believably, as just sort of like bumpkins who would like, when Seymour Stein said, "Where do you want to go?" they wanted to go to McDonald's because they'd never been. They met Bono from U2, and he was like, "Don't you want to be famous?" And they're like, "No, we don't really care." He's like, "I do. I want it more than anything in the world." There's so many good little parts like that. Yeah, I love it.
What's your favorite profile, Jason?
Oh, favorite profile would probably be, I mean, it's not music. Well,
Frank
it's
Sinatra's
already
got a cold.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And it's funny that I immediately thought that's not music, because I just don't even think of Frank Sinatra as a musician. It's just as like some...
A goon. Did you ever read...
But yes, Frank Sinatra Has a Cold is, by far the greatest celebrity profile I've ever read. And also, my friend Kai Henderson was once hired by Felix Dennis, the guy who owned Maxim magazine. He was hired to follow him around on his vanity poetry tour, and to write a vanity book about it. And and Kai was pushing hard for Felix Dennis Has an Ode, but I think he was overruled.
Oh God, yeah. It's too good. The title was too good. That was, yeah. Did you ever read His Way by Kitty Kelly? It was the unauthorized Frank Sinatra biography. That
No.
I'm sorry. Do I
No,
need
I'm
to?
just moving that so I can see your face.
Oh, okay. That might have been part of the point.
These are the challenges of trying to record a podcast in the sun on a porch.
Oh, but it's great. It's tawdry. Like, it's a like, that guy was a real goon, Sinatra. Like, he literally had, and he had goons too. Like, there's a story that Tony Bennett's wife tells, or maybe one of his wives. I don't know if he got remarried a bunch of times, but they went to dinner with him in Miami, and some like old guy came up to their table and was like, "Hey, it's you, Frank. Like, I love you. I have all your records. I'm a big fan." I think it's in the 70s or 80s or something. And Sinatra doesn't say a word to him, and his two guys were with him. One of them pulls his coat over the guy's, like, between the guy and, like, anybody else who can see, like, makes a little shield with his, like, trench coat, and the other just punches him in the face, like an old man. And they kick him out of the restaurant. And, like, I think Tony Bennett's wife, like, looks at Tony, and Tony's just kind of like, I think this is just a thing that happens. Tony Bennett's wife's like, I don't think that's okay. Like...
The only thing I remember from that James Brown biography is in which the moment in which they described him as a Vex machine.
Wow.
That's good. Have you seen Tales from the Tour Bus?
No, what's that?
Oh god. It's so Mike Judge made it. He's made 2 seasons so far, and the first one was all country and western musicians. And it's basically little oral history profiles of, like, Johnny Paycheck, Waylon Jennings, George Jones, and Tammy Wynette. And he gets all the, like, living members, their, like, backup bands, their, like, their road managers, the people they did, their drug dealers and shit like that. It gets them all, and it's, like, little 30-minute, like, docs on them, but he cuts out, all this stupid childhood shit and stuff like that and just focuses on the good stories. Like, it's just, the real, the juicy shit, and it's all just told from, first person perspective by these people, and then he animates it kind of like King of the Hill style, and it's incredible. And there's, like, I think he gets to the 5th episode, he introduces all of them, like, draws himself and describes, what each of the artists, why they're important and stuff like that, and he gets to the 5th one and he's like done introducing him, and he's like as I realize now, like, the other 4 people we've profiled, he has shot a man. Like, just like, those guys lived fucking rough. And then, so in the 2nd season, he did funk. He switched from country to funk, and he did, like, the George Clinton episodes. It's absolutely insane. Then, like, a Rick James 2-parter, a James Brown 2-parter, Bootsy Collins, Morris Day of the time. I was about to say Morris D from the SLPC, but the other Morris. And then Betty Davis, who was Miles Davis' second wife, I think, who was she was a more obscure figure in the funk world. Not Betty Davis with an E, like Betty, Betty.
Yeah, her records are good.
Oh,
I remember hearing those when I worked at a record store.
They're wild. They're raunchy.
Yeah, they are very. Yeah, and supposedly she was a very like not that way in her daily life.
Right.
So,
she's like a teetotal and not super libidinous, supposedly. Anyway, that show. So there's a whole episode on her too, and I think that, like, honestly, if I'd say, like, if anything's the best musician profile I've seen, like, that show is one of the best shows that's come out in the last, like, 10 years. It's like a service. So you learn so much about, like, country, like the history of country music, specifically, like, outlaw country and stuff like that. Just from those wild road stories, and you get the sense of it. Just, like, how much fucking cocaine those guys did. Like, Waylon Jennings once blew up a club with he carried around sticks of dynamite that he got from some guy, just got him, and he got angry about not getting paid on time and somewhere, and so he blew up the guy's office with a stick of dynamite. It's like, those guys really, they had some fun.
So, what do you spend most of your time thinking about these days?
Christ. Ugh, I try not. I think I do meditate a lot, which is about trying not to think about things. I think a lot about the last 15 years. I've been trying to kind of, like, catalog a lot of shit that's gone on. Then I'm doing, it's sort of I figure now is a great time to sort of how to say, compile the existing memories, revisit old notebooks and shit like that, and kind of get whatever I can down on paper or somewhere, and close up shop. Makes sense of the weird decade and a half that was.
Yeah, and for our listener, the last 15 years you spent working at Vice, and is it fair to say that that's the one job on your resume, if you had a resume?
Yeah. If I get around to writing a resume at some point, which I should have done months ago. That would be it. That's basically it. I was an intern my last year of college for Vice magazine, back when it was basically just a magazine. There was a record label, but there was no video shit. And then the day after I graduated from college, I became an editorial assistant. I got hired for a whopping $15K a year.
Really?
That was my starting salary.
That's
I think it was lower, and they realized that they were breaking somebody with like a copy of the New York, or like, just any law book, realized they were breaking minimum wage standards with that. But I was happy. Like
But can't you get around that by making that person a manager? I think somehow.
Yes, you probably, undoubtedly. You can
So
definitely,
as long as he
definitely
has
put him
some
on a
sort of-
1099. Yeah, just pay him nothing. Never pay him. But yeah, so that's it. Like before that, I attended bar a little bit while I was in college, and I had like weird jobs in Atlanta. I was like busboy at a Japanese restaurant, and worked at a Napa Auto Parts warehouse, and delivered newspapers, crap like that. Worked at a pharmacy.
Let me hone in on something you said, though. You talked about cataloging the past 15 years. I think you meant mentally, right? And is that because you've never done it before? I mean,
Yeah, no, I was living it. Like, I mean, you were there for a good amount of it. There was a certain momentum to doing work at Vice, which doesn't really exist in the outside media world. I've learned it's like projects don't really go from kind of like germination to pitch to no development to just being there and doing things to being done to moving on to the next thing in the course of like 3 weeks anywhere else, it seems.
Yeah.
It's like it's odd to hear back from emails within a week, it turns out. I think from regular folks. And so it was like, there was never I was never much of a diary keeper per se, but I'd always keep like a good English teacher in high school was like, you should always keep a notebook on you, and that is great advice. And so there's a lot of downtime when you're traveling, especially in planes and in airports, in vans with a bunch of people and stuff. So I'd write a lot of notes, but I never I was always too busy doing things to do things. So
yeah, I experienced a bit of that myself, so that's why I was wondering if that was a shared experience, because I did certainly feel like, whoa, I don't even know what just happened in the past 6 years. For me, it was about 6 years, and I can't imagine just looking at 15 years, especially at a moment where you need to try to explain that to someone else.
Right.
About like, so what have you been doing for the past 15 years,
Jesus,
Mr. Morton, is it?
God, yeah.
Yeah, so how do you explain that to someone who's looking to trade money for labor?
Poorly.
What are your marketable skills?
None. I'm learning, like in a very real way, like for real. Like I once was able to write well or reasonably well and edit well. That was the one good thing I had was I could edit. But that's not in high demand anywhere anymore. Like even places that have or at least should have editors, like you've seen the state of discourse or just of copy, just of like text anywhere. It's just garbage. There's submarine?
That's weird. I don't know. Something was just beeping at us.
We're getting binged.
But I think it's fine. Anyway.
British find us? Let's watch Das Boot the other night. Fucking. It's a
Director's cut?
I did not watch the director's cut. I watched the like the regular 4-hour version or whatever. There's a lot of shots of guys standing with binoculars in that movie. It's like 40 minutes of just like just 5 men holding binoculars and like going while waves splash around them. masterpiece.
Well, I used to own a video store, and we had the director's cut of Das Boot.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's good about the VHS format is that there is a physical representation of length, and so when you have that double VHS cassette,
Those boxes were
you have to kind of commit,
hefty.
and I was never willing to commit. So
it's like changing the side of a record. Yeah, getting the cassette out and putting in number 2, hoping it's rewound. Yeah.
Yeah, it's never rewound, especially at least from the rental shop.
Well, that's why you guys have those rewinders behind the desk, the ones that are shaped like sports cars.
That's right.
Those were big sellers.
That's right.
What happened to those factories? I hope they found something else to make. I hope they were already making something else. You don't even see those at garage sales. Those just go straight in the trash.
Do you mind if I grab some water?
I don't.
Can I get you anything while I'm in?
I'm okay. Oh, would you grab me a black cherry seltzer?
I will.
I'd love that. How's Chicago?
Same as always. It's a little warm and humid in the summer for my taste,
Right.
but I've lived here most of my life and always appreciated it, so it's good.
Good. Yeah.
Did you grow up in New York?
I grew up in Georgia, in like suburban Atlanta, and then I moved to New York when I was 18. So I've been to the city, and then I moved up here like 2 years ago and spent like a year, kind of doing a weekend thing.
The 18 move was like more for college, or more just to like
it was 100%
go to
for
New
college.
York?
Yeah, I mean it was.
Okay.
I was lucky to go to college in New York, and
Yeah.
to get into there, because it otherwise would have been probably at least 4 more years of Georgia. So it was a combination of those things. The direct impetus was going to college, but it was also getting the fuck out of Georgia. Thank you.
So this was like a smaller town that you didn't care for in Georgia?
It was the suburbs, so it was like it was if you go like 30 minutes out, like 30 minutes west of Chicago. What's that? Is that like Lake Park or one of those? I'm really bad at the Chicago geography.
Depends what direction, but that's
Yeah.
more or less where I'm from. They're about 40 minutes out from Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I found it's strip mall country. It's like there was a Atlanta is mostly, I think it's like 80% transplants, like people from other places, and so like it's rare that I had like been born there and grown up there. And when my family moved into the house I grew up in when I was like 2 or 3, it was like the edge of the suburbs. Like if you drove 10 minutes north, you'd start seeing like farm country and shit like that. And now it's like smack in the middle of the sprawl. It's like an hour away from anything approaching rural.
Yeah, that's the exact same story.
Yeah.
There was a lot more forests and just wheat fields, and now, none of that, and it takes forever to get out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's interesting. I find, because people, and I always assumed when I was growing up in Georgia, I was like, oh, like I have I must be Southern. I am in the South. But it's like I find the more people I've met across the country, it's like I have more in common with somebody who lives like the same distance outside of like Washington, D.C. or Chicago or San Diego or something than I do with somebody who lives like 40 minutes outside of Atlanta, like up in North Georgia. That's why I identify much more as suburban than as Southern.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Interesting.
A lot of parking lot hangs. Which is better than parking lot hangings, which is what used to be the South. So the town I grew up in, though, Marietta, which was a small town, was famous for lynching Leo Frank in 1936, I think.
Does Marietta have anything to do with Lockheed?
Martin Marietta was based
that
over
was
there.
a person.
It was Martin Marietta at one point, and then it became Lockheed Martin. And it was based out of Marietta because Dobbins Air Force Base is right there.
I'm reading Skunk Works, which is Ben Rich from Lockheed, his memoir.
The Skunk Works at Area 51, or
It was out of Burbank, California.
Burbank, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
But that's
what they do refer to Lake Groom or Groom Lake as the Skunk Works too, right? Or no, it's Dreamland. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm fucking it up.
Skunk Works was like the
is-
special projects,
Right.
super secret development place where they developed the U-2, the Blackbird, the F-117, the stealth fighter.
I believe it's the Nighthawk. Is the F-117?
Oh, I don't know.
No?
I think that's
it
right.
has a name.
I think that's right. Yeah.
SR-71 Blackbird was the coolest fucking jet.
It's pretty cool. But what
it had no armaments, did it? It was just a camera plane.
Yeah, none of those. Oh, I mean, obviously the fighter plane did,
Yeah.
but yes. But yeah, but one of the funniest anecdotes in there that I, certainly demands a feature-length article of some sort was basically they're just talking about the other uses for the U-2. They decided that they wanted to use special infrared photography to be able to look at the different stages of poppy growth.
Yeah.
So they had some like Mexican drug guy. They like brought him in, and they grew this field of poppies, and then they were just doing these U2 overflights to kind of like, check.
Control tests.
To be able to identify the different stages of growth so that they could know when to hit them. And then they were going to do the final stage, the final pass, and the entire field had been cleared.
Oh my god.
This guy that they brought in from Mexico harvested the poppies and absconded to Mexico. So it was the first U.S. government...
Mistake.
Yeah.
Sorry, the first U.S. government opium...
Oh, no, because Thomas Jefferson used to grow opium in Monticello.
Oh, but then exported to Mexico. I'm sorry.
So they reversed the chain.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there was a lot of like CIA oversight to that too, since it was the U2. Those guys really, they're the Delta Taus of the fucking of the national, I guess the military-industrial complex.
What else?
What else?
So this is what happens when I fail to prepare.
Well, that's usually when you talk to somebody, there's like something going on. Like they're actively involved in something. They're making something. And I'm not. Like, and I'm, like I hit the brakes. Well, the brakes hit me more than that. In a major, major way. So I'm basically, I'm spending most of my time just combing through the various different pasts, my own and, other shit.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. There's not much going on in the present. At least, yeah.
Well, look, I mean, maybe that's something for us to talk about. What I was going to say is that since I've never interviewed you before, I refuse to interview you now, and B,
You're doing a great job of that.
Thank you, and B, I refuse to prepare for the interview,
Yeah.
which kind of stands in contrast to when you and I would work together in the field. Is that I was the producer, and therefore I was hell-bent on making sure that we got these bits and hit all of the marks. And sometimes one of the most infuriating experiences in the entire fucking world was to be sitting there while you were interviewing someone talking about God knows what, and me just sitting there just like, oh my God, will you please fucking get to the thing we need to get to? And just when I was about to interrupt, you would just kind of naturally ask that question, and I'd be like, oh, and there would just be this pressure release and be like, okay, I need to just like fucking lay off and just let him do his thing.
Torturing producers is one of the greatest perks of the job of being a host. Like, it's wonderful.
Tell us more about that. But talk to us about interview style and your personal approach to interviewing.
Well, I was always I was so awful. Like, I had no when I started doing interviews, it was for the magazine. So everything like when I started at Vice, it was all print stuff. Like, that's why it was there. And I'd done an English degree in college, and I tried to do a journalism like minor or maybe like a split major or something like that. And I took the introductory course, which is like reporting 1, I think, or 101, whatever it was. And you're supposed to go out and interview people, and just like every week is a basic homework assignment. And I think I tried to do it once and was just so like, I just hate, like, I was kind of shy. And I just hated interrupting people, and it was like their answers were so lousy, and I would just make up that shit every fucking week. I would just, it was like, I think you were supposed to, ask 5 people or 4 people, one question, all 4 of them, see how they responded, and it's supposed to be like basic reporting. And I hated that class for a number of fucking reasons, which is why I hate kind of institutional journalism to this day. And so when I got to Vice and I actually had to interview people, I was basically scared shitless. And I finally, I don't know, I realized I try to sort of asked the questions the way I saw them written in the magazine, which was heavily edited. And it's anytime you read any print interview where there's like a Q&A, like there has to be editing going on. Like that's just the nature of it. But trying to, make it these, thinking that whatever I asked on tape was what was going to end up on the page. I have to make it these, really precise, concise, witty sort of, but also extremely penetrative questions that get, the elicit the perfect response. I mean, you don't do it. Like nobody does it. Or maybe somebody does. I guess like talk show hosts probably do it pretty well. It's a skill. But I don't have that skill at all, and so I just end up talking to people. And then what I found out was once you start talking to people, one, that's fun. It's great talking to people if they know how to talk, and that's not always a given. But usually people do, especially if they have, if you're interviewing them, there's something they're interested in or interesting about them. And listening to people talk about the things that are interesting to them is usually interesting. And then, stuff will come up. So I guess I adopted a conversational interview technique for want of having any other ability that I was necessarily good at, and knowing that things would be edited, getting used to the fact that there's a degree of control, especially because I was, when I was doing the print stuff, I was transcribing and then writing up and then editing all my own articles. So all the embarrassing shit I ended up saying, all the weird things where, like the worst thing on earth is like just sitting there and being like, I can't think of what I'm supposed to, like those really bad pauses where you're like, whoa, I can't even think what I'm supposed to be talking to you about for like 30 seconds and stuff like that. Like nobody has to know, and it's great. And then ditto, as long as you're not doing live television, like same with doing video interviews. And basically I took, when we started doing the video stuff at Vice, all I did was just try to directly translate what I had been doing writing-wise onto into in front of a camera, just move it directly there and just do exactly as I'd been doing the whole time, for better or worse. And I think for producers it was way worse, because it would lead to like 2-hour interviews that were just literally me shooting the shit with somebody, vaguely on topic half the time, kind of winding around. But I always like in my, like, I did know that there were things to get, but I always liked finding out things more. It always bugged me, like, and there's a trade-off you have to make when you're making videos of knowing what you're going to get, planning what's going to happen in the field, and then getting a chance to see what does, and like actually experience spontaneity and reality and things like that, and learn things, which is like when you're writing an article and you go in and interview somebody, you don't ask them questions you know the answer to, because you can just write that. Like
right.
you ask them things you want to know, and so
right.
that was always my approach, asking things I wanted to know and get around it. And then sometimes it would work. Like I remember there was in Kazakhstan, there was this like ridiculous, I think it was a 4-hour interview I did with this doctor that was like, and I ate shit for it when I got back, like, because they had to have it translated.
And I was immediately thinking about how much that must cost to translate, because
right?
basically you get through about 15 minutes a day.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's a lengthy process. It must have taken them over a week or two to translate.
And then you get the spot
interview.
checker who comes in and says, well, actually, this is all wrong, or this doesn't mean this.
Yeah.
And this.
Everybody.
No, this is not her, it's him.
But what was crazy about that interview was, well, there's a number of things that were crazy about it, but ultimately the wild thing was in hour 3-minute 55, the guy we were talking to, he was a village doctor in a town that was right next to a nuclear testing site, an old Soviet nuclear testing site, and whatever point we ended on struck, like, it struck a nerve with him, because I think I was talking about something about how the Russians had abandoned Kazakhstan after the Soviet Union collapsed, as far as like the nuclear stuff, where there was like zero problem. And he went off on a tear, and he got up and he was like, and it like rang a bell in his head, and he was like, you want to see what the Russians think about the Kazakhs? You want to see how the Soviet Union fucking operated? And he went and opened a vault that was in the back of his room, and he pulled out a handmade KGB, like a zine almost. It was research notes essentially, but it was a handmade research book with photos of deformed Kazakhs from around the area where they'd done the nuclear testing, which was like, it was just red-handed proof positive that they knew the effects of what was happening, or that they knew that the effects of the radiation was getting outside of the area that they thought it was, claiming that it was, safe to be outside of, that they knew the effects it was having on the population, that it was continuing and stuff like that. And that was, that was a major kind of scoop, and that came after, 3 hours and 50 minutes of chit chat. So sometimes the windy road leads to pictures of deformed Kazakhs.
That's great. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Great.
Yeah. It is great.
But speaking of Kazakhstan, I'm thinking about Kyrgyzstan, and a thing that still haunts me. It's not actually related to our story. It's a shot we didn't get, and I think we've probably talked about this before. But we were driving from one side of the country to the other, and coming in the opposite direction, we saw some sort of like 4-door sedan, like maybe some old kind of 4-door Soviet era sedan. But on top of it was a gigantic satellite dish, like, communicate with space satellite dish, not like for someone to install at their house for TV reception. And
it was the mobile Kyrgyz SETI unit.
Yeah, and they were moving slowly. I think there were like 4 people like walking. They had like balanced it on the top of this car, and there were people like walking alongside it. And we drove past at like 80 miles an hour. We're like, oh shit, we should stop and go shoot that. And then, but we didn't. And then 5 minutes later, I remember thinking like, well, if we stop now and turn around, it's still only 15 minutes to double back. And then I think 30 minutes later, I was thinking about it, I was like, fuck, that's like some National Geographic shit. Like, if we stop now, I think we still have time to go 30 minutes back and then, make up the time. And then like an hour later, I'm still thinking about it. And I bring it up to Bernardo, and he's like, I know, I've been thinking about it the whole, It's like, and it was like, I don't even, what year was that? 2012 or something like that. And I'm still haunted by that incredible visual. And to that end, I'm also reminded of being in North Korea when, they would only let us stop and shoot certain things. Yeah. Again, driving in a big hurry from point A to point B, we saw some incredible vista. And I think, Jake and Jerry and I all at the same time were just like, oh my God. And one of the minders is like, you are the only people who are sad when you see something beautiful. I was like, yeah, that's because you won't let us film it.
That's what was great about being a host. I could write that shit. I didn't have to. I didn't miss anything, unless I was asleep, which I probably was.
Thomas, I did come up with a question that I have for you. You earlier on referred to yourself as being shy, like as you initially started interviewing people, and I'm wondering how much, if at all, you would still describe yourself that way?
Not at all. Yeah. I mean, my job was talking to people for a living. Like, especially after I got out of like writing, where like the talking is at least preparation for the job, which is still a solitary act. Yeah, no, it was an amazing education in being able to socialize, because I wasn't like, cripplingly shy, but I definitely wasn't an upfront conversationalist, as you would say. And it's just over the years of practicing, I'm not a wild extroverted sort of, given in most circumstances.
Looking pretty comfy with that shirt off.
Thank you. Well, I'm at my home right now, and I'm the nearest person is probably like half a mile away.
Yeah. Who are your neighbors here?
Weirdos. So the person who I rent the house from lives not in that place that you can see, but like that distance from that house in another house. He just came by last night. He's one of the guys. He was one of the founders of Etsy, and he was kind of like, I think, like the really creative one who got sort of pushed out of the company at some point when the business people sort of took over and stuff like that. And so he's the reason I'm up in Catskill. Like, I came to film a thing with him up here, and he owns a bunch of properties and stuff like that. But he also does all these weird, cool projects. Like, he's trying to build like essentially, I think, kind of like a Montessori-inspired kind of high school. Which is, it's usually, he does have a school that he started that is Montessori-ish, that's like, young kids. But he's trying to do that, and he like had, when I came up to film with him, he had like these weird, really high-end speakers he was making with a guy who was like really into old 1930s era acoustic technology and stuff like that. and he built a little lab or workshop for them. They were collecting components from like old tube amps and stuff like that from all around the world and assembling them and stuff like that. So and there's like a bunch of those kind of like, I don't know, oddball sort of. A lot of them are like New York City dropouts, you know, people who get a little older, I guess, which is kind of like what I am, and move on to somewhere a little slower to work on things. There's I have a good painter friend here who used to work for Vice named Jim Cruzen. Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. He plays music too. Anyway,
D. Cruzen?
he was not a member of D. Cruzen, unfortunately. He was in, I believe, his one of his bands. Well, he's been in a bunch of bands. He's like one of those guys who'll like, you know, like play drums for everybody in town. But he had a country band called Jim Ginny and the
like
Pine
whether
Tops.
they want to hear it or not,
or yeah, just like any paying gig.
Oh,
it's like, you know, it's like one of those towns with like 10 bands, 5 drummers, kind of thing. But he was in his he is a gay man, and his and a really good visual illustrator. But he was in a punk band with, God, I can't remember who it was in, but they were called Fag Bash back in 90s New York. He used to play at like Brownies and stuff like that. An old member of the scene. So it's basically old scenes, a bunch of old scenesters, and then like a handful of townies, pretty much, and a small handful at that. It's a very small town. It's a village. It's not even a small town. It's a village.
And what's the weirdest thing that's happened around here?
The weirdest thing? There's historically there's a plane crash that was I think it was a FedEx plane or a UPS plane. It was some sort of like small cargo plane. Flew into a mountain not far from here, and I've been up the mountain a couple times. It's like the wreckage isn't like on a trail or anything like that, and I've gotten close enough to see it, but I haven't gotten close enough to take the photo that I want, which is a recreation of that the cover of that Blondie album where she's crawling out of the car wreck. You know the one?
No, I don't.
Oh.
Do you know it, Eric?
It's which album is it?
I must have seen it 100 times, but I'm not able to call that image to mind right now.
Anyway, I haven't gotten close enough to play in the wreckage yet. So I don't know if that's really weird. There's a bunch of like strange standing stones and stuff. There's this thing called the Devil's Tombstone, which is basically just a big old like, you know, monolith just sitting in somebody's yard. Some cool like sculpture gardens and crap like that. There was a big to-do about somebody thought that Rip Van Winkle is purportedly from Catskill, even though I think, you know, he wasn't real. But he's on it like
you confused me for a moment there. I was like, I just came over the Rip Van Winkle bridge to get here.
There you go, yeah. So. And it's when you come into town, the Welcome to Catskill sign has a picture of Rip on it. It's the bearded guy who looks like a wizard, but his eyes are closed, and that's how you know it's Rip Van Winkle. And there was this fuss earlier in the year where, like, I don't even think it was, like, I don't think they were actually considering getting rid of Rip Van Winkle from the signs, but, like, somebody thought they were. Like, they're like, oh, they're going to get, you know, they think it's a bad image for the town, this sleeping guy. And so all these, like, or not all these, like 4 or 5 like local folks got together, and they decided that the problem with Rip Van Winkle wasn't, you know, Rip Van Winkle, it was the fact that he was sleeping. They're like, and that's what gives it a bad image. I thought you were going to say that
it was because he was white.
That is not a problem here. But so their solution to the problem was they didn't, you know, they're like, we can't abandon Rip. What we need to do is wake Rip up. So they wanted to they were like, make him active, make him like, you know, an industrious member of the village, of a society, and, you know, productive, blah, blah, blah. And so they wanted to basically paint eyeballs over the shut eyelids of Rip Van Winkle, which is the only identifying feature of Rip Van Winkle. The fact that he's asleep is the only thing he's famous for, sleeping. And that finally petered out. But that was a major town conflict over the last like 5 months.
Wow.
A wild like almost like Kentucky Holler style feud.
Wow, I may have to stop at the library on my way out of town and check out the microfiche.
Yeah, if there was a newspaper in town, it would definitely it would definitely be an entertaining.
That's what
read.
You should do. You should start the town newspaper.
Start it, yeah. That's That's a really profitable
newspapers-
venture. I would like to do that though.
You
I've been
would
thinking
get a
about
lot of
making
attention
zine.
for opening a newspaper.
I know, right?
You know,
Yeah,
not
no.
a lot of people do that these days.
That's I've thought of that, and actually I've never said it aloud. So I'm glad you encouraged that. Maybe I will.
I would move up here and join your editorial board.
You know what else that we don't have in Catskill?
Cub photographer,
Yeah?
maybe.
I could probably get you a spot there, pull some strings, see what I can do. Maybe you know, like maybe a summer internship.
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
We could use intern labor for everything. One thing I realized that we don't have up here also is local news. Like, we're near enough Albany that there's like local news stations, but I really want to do is make a local news, like following all the classic, you know, the classic conventions of the form.
Yeah.
Get,
I think that would be huge.
I think so too.
But wait, going back to the recreating rock covers, is that a thing of yours? Because I remember when we were in like a
Gaza. Not Gaza.
junkyard in the West Bank.
In the West Bank, yeah.
Thomas suddenly got inspired to recreate a Husker Du album cover.
It was the cover of Zen Arcade.
Oh yeah.
I just saw that picture recently. Yeah. Well, it reminded me of that picture.
Yeah.
I think album covers are an easy one to recreate. They're, you know, just images that are burned in your brain.
What other ones have you done?
Paintings, I can't think of any right now. That's the only one. That would have been the example I would have used if you'd asked the question open ended. Because I can't think of a single. I know I've done it, but I cannot name an example.
No Morrissey, no Smiths.
Well, those.
Well, not covers.
Those
I
covers
guess,
are
but
all.
You just
those are just
naturally do a
pictures
lot
of,
of
like-
Morrissey poses in
Oh,
your
I
life.
guess so.
I think.
Maybe that's just because I wear glasses.
I was going to say whenever you come across flowers, I think.
Well, that's true too. He never had the flowers on the cover though. That's it. Most of the covers were just stills from old movies. So it's like, you know, it'd be like Truman Capote jumping from like the cover of Music for Chameleons.
Right.
Yeah. So pretentious. Love that band.
After we saw The Dictators, my friend was harassing Handsome Dick Manitoba to recreate the pose on the cover of that album. So, yeah, it's not
Did
unheard of
he get him
hobby.
to do it?
My friend did it. Dick was not participating.
And Manitoba's just closed his bar.
No.
Oh, that's
are
too
you
bad.
kidding?
I never got
Closed a couple months ago.
God damn it. Everything's gone. Hey, is Peter Pan Bakery still open
Oh yeah,
in Greenpoint?
still
Okay.
there.
Yeah, we're
I
just.
should have. I should have brought you some. I'm sorry.
Oh, buddy. Well, it's not. I don't think it's open on Sunday.
Oh yeah,
Is
it's
it?
open every day.
Oh, it is. Okay.
I mean, whether or not they actually have donuts is
Well,
another
that's always-
question.
yeah, that's always the-
Yeah, it's the weirdest. You know, it's a great donut shop, but the only
It's the
donut shop
best.
I've ever been that when you go early in the morning, they do not yet have donuts.
They haven't finished baking them,
because
yeah.
I guess their theory is we just opened. How are we supposed to have donuts?
Right.
You know.
Well, do you ever get the egg sandwiches there? That's my
Yeah.
jam. That shit's. I can't believe that stuff's still like $2.
Yeah, no, it's true. Bacon, egg,
Yeah.
and cheese on a heavily buttered
Very
bagel. It's yeah.
That place is wonderful. The uniforms.
Would you work at Peter Pan?
I don't think they.
Do you like those uniforms?
I don't think they would let me work at Peter Pan because I'm not an attractive Polish woman in her 20s.
I see, but
I would happily work at Peter Pan. I'd happily do any job at this point.
but you've done a lot of, you know, you're one of your things, if I can say that. I'm using
Yeah.
air quotes here, is you know, this sort of quote unquote experiential journalism in
Right.
you know, just kind of learning the hard way what it takes to do certain things.
As Amy put it, my job was doing other people's chores for a living and being filmed doing it or writing about it. Yeah.
But I mean, one of my fantasies, or not fantasies, I would say, things I want to do before I die is to be able to utilize any vehicle that James Bond might use to escape a situation. So, you know, motorcycle,
Right.
car,
Right.
I can ride a horse.
Speedboat, I'm sure. You can ride a
Speedboat,
horse.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's tricky.
Not very well. I mean, but to escape. I can,
Gyrocopter.
I cannot fly a helicopter nor a gyrocopter nor.
Yeah.
But what about you? I feel like you must have a few extra odd vehicles in there, like.
You know what? I've done a lot of weird jobs. I don't think I've driven that many vehicles. I've driven a tugboat, which was amazing.
Right.
One of them. I mean, working on
And
a
where
tugboat.
and where
in
was
general.
that, and what's involved in driving a tugboat?
It was down the Hudson from where we're looking right now. It was in New York Harbor, and it was most of the work I did on the tugboat. I worked as the deckhand, which pretty much just means you tie and untie barges all day, and you just move the barges to different places. And sometimes the barges have something on them, usually they don't. and that's it. And then otherwise, you sit around and you drink coffee and you smoke cigarettes. You complain over the radio or make jokes and stuff like that. And then the captain drives the boat, and he let me drive the boat, which I don't know if maybe you should have, but whatever, he did. with 2 barges attached, so it was suddenly, tugboat's maybe a 50-foot vessel or something, but it was suddenly a 300-foot vessel through the East River. And he was screwing with me the whole time.
How's that?
So he had this little remote control steering wheel device. So there's not a wheel on this boat. It's more recent. It's last year's model or whatever tugboat. It's a contemporary bridge design. So there's not a wheel. There's like a little dial or something that you control the rudder with. So that's what you steer with. And there's one on the, where you'd expect it to be, on the bridge, right in the middle of the windows. You look out and you turn it. And then there's a second one that's on a cable. It's kind of like an old, video game joystick. And that's so you can take it if you have to walk outside the bridge and, make sure you're, not getting too close to something on the right or the left or the port or the starboard. You can take that and be able to still steer. It's the remote control for the vehicle. He didn't tell me that existed. And so as I was steering under the Williamsburg Bridge with 2 barge loads tied in tandem, he was correcting my steering and steering the boat towards the bridge, towards the edge of the bridge, and then yelling at me for not, he's like, I said turn left. Why don't you turn the rudder left? And I was like, I'm doing it. I was like, I'm turning as far left as it goes. He was just sitting there clicking it every time. So that's tugboat life. It's a lot of jovial, mirth, pretty much. And it's you've driven a boat though before. It's just you kind of have to think a little bit ahead. You can't, it doesn't respond as quickly. And tugboats, especially when there's 2 enormous barges attached to it, you're basically operating a tiny cruise liner at that point. But otherwise, it's just you gotta remember the caliber of people until you get into piloting, which involves math. The caliber of people who are able to do transportation-oriented jobs is not they're not people with degrees necessarily. That captain, which is not to say they're not smart people, but it's you can meet dumb tugboat captains. You can meet dumb people who ride motorcycles. I'd say it's trickier to learn than it is difficult, say. Just takes doing. I think tugboat's the only thing I ever really drove.
Oh.
What can you think of something else?
No, that's the first thing that came to mind. I just assumed that there were more.
No,
since you've been
really
cataloging.
Weren't. I drove a camper van, but that's not too exciting, is it?
What about innovative means of escape on foot? Any particular?
Mostly just running.
Field skills. Identifying edible mushrooms.
Not in this hemisphere. Were I to find myself in Malaysia in the rainforest without a canteen and without access to a water source, which are plentiful there, I do know which vine, but somehow I have the means to chop this vine. I would know which vine to chop to get water.
That's useful.
I think.
That's useful.
I should know which vine to chop to get water, which is useful. Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's all these, all those fun little Boy Scout skills. Tying knots, which it's one of those things that, if I'm I know how to do that. Here, let me show you. I'd totally screw it up. But if I'm just things are chill, just have a rope, can screw around with it, I'll be oh shit, I know how to tie a bowline. How about that? I've only learned it 20 times, but how about that? It's stuck. There's, I think the skills I picked up are not necessarily marketable or helpful yet, but God knows. You never know when you're going to end up in Malaysia.
It's true. I didn't retain, that's not fair to say. I shouldn't say retain. I was shit at tying knots in Cub Scouts, but I think the only thing I was able to do was fold the flag properly.
Well, I wasn't good at that, so you got me over on that one. What's ridiculous about tying knots is and what I found was when I was out on the boat and tying, you have to tie knots because that's what you do on a boat. You tie things. Like, I remember that from Cub Scouts. You just have a rope, and you're supposed to make a shape. It's very abstract, you know. And it's like, who gives a fuck too? You're just like, that's a clove hitch and that's a bowline. And it's like, when I was on the boat, it's like, so I don't remember, I don't remember the names for any of those things, but a day of working with the deckhand on the boat and getting slapped in the hand for doing things wrong and yelled at, and that kind of stuff. I like, once there's a practical application to it, and it like makes sense. It's like, oh, bowline, yeah, you're making a little loop so that you can hook your boat onto something. Like, it's a lot easier. That's a classic problem with pedagogy. Like, you're trying to teach these kids all this abstract shit, and you need to serve with love it. You gotta show them how it applies to their lives.
Well, yeah, but that's. I was taking a deep breath as you were talking about the tugboat captains and education and things like that, because I'm real down on formal education these days.
Fuck it.
What about you, Eric?
I wonder. I mean, I think a generation of people growing up realizing that almost anything they know they can look up or watch a YouTube tutorial and have a good chance of applying that immediately would have to impact like going to college to just learn stuff in general. But I don't know at what rate or that change will take place or what it will really change to.
Well, it's interesting to me. One of the things that my neighbor Rob, who's started one school and is trying to start another, is really interested in is in the history of public education in Western Europe and America, and how nakedly the people who designed it were talking about it as a we need to create workers who are okay with being inside a building for 9 to 10 hours a day, sitting at a table and doing monotonous chores essentially, and like ipso facto you have fucking public schools, and it's like now we're in our third or fourth generation at least of that being a fairly universal thing in the country, and it's like, yeah, like here's the rewards for it. And it is interesting, the access to information. Like, I've always been down on college as anything, like I always hated the fact that it was like everybody was the push for everybody to go to college versus I had a good time reading books and writing papers on Chaucer and Joyce and pretentious crap like that, but it's like it was not in any way it was like if I hadn't made it into college or I hadn't gotten scholarships or anything like that, I did not foresee my life being the wreck that I saw them telling kids who would have been probably way better off in a trade school or just going out on their own and finding things to do and taking out enormous fucking loans to go to the community college or state school to do just this expectation that everybody has to go into higher education. It seems like such a racket,
right?
On top of the whole educational model being fucked up to begin with. Just this.
Yeah, I should correct myself and say I don't have a problem with formal education in terms of pursuing learning.
Yeah,
I think it's more credentialing. The credentialing, and especially the liberal arts credentialing, as some sort of necessary requirement to be able to work.
What you gonna do with that degree? That shit, that attitude.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I do think that it should 100% be pursued as a means of opening your mind to new experiences and reading Chaucer and
that's the thing with the liberal arts education, why it was so all over the board too, was that you learn how to adjust the way you think, and the way you think about how you think,
yeah. But I definitely don't think that should be a baseline requirement for people to be able to work for a living.
Yeah.
I remember being young enough but getting old enough to start asking my questions parents I don't care for this school. How long does this go on for? And they're 12 years, but then you'll do 4 more. And I'm like, well, I'm 20 and I don't even get to have fun or do anything. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, but then I get to just chill out. And they're like, no, then you work. And I was like, what? How long does that go on for? They're like, it goes on for a long time, many decades. And I was like, you're telling me I gotta be 70 before I can have fun? This is garbage.
It's ridiculous. I remember having that same argument or a similar argument with my mom and just being so I'm spending a third of my life preparing for the next 2/3. What's that shit? What if the next 2/3 don't even happen?
Yeah.
But we should probably start wrapping up soon. Where should we take this to the end?
Yeah, well, how bad a pain was I to work with, by the way? I always wondered this. 'Cause no one's ever honest about that when you're working with them.
Let me think about it. Well, opportunity to work with you is one of the reasons I took the job, to be honest, and that
Jesus,
was
wow.
based on, well, I enjoyed your work, and then the first time you and I worked together was in the West Bank, doing the West Bank street racing story
Yeah.
for the Vice Guide to Everything on MTV, the very short-lived MTV show.
The deservedly short-lived. The well-shelved.
I have a non-disparagement agreement, so I'll refrain from...
Do you? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, I do too, but that thing's so, like, that's such a weird open-ended, like, how the hell do they expect that to hold up? I mean, I probably shouldn't even be talking about the thing, but, like, seriously. Like, what is disparagement? There's not a legal definition of disparagement.
Is there not?
The definition that was in, so the thing that was in my paperwork, which I definitely shouldn't be talking about, but whatever, was, it was anything said that can be shown to have caused damage to a business operation or the reputation of an employee. It's like, so anything said that then has an effect, regardless of intention, regardless of subject matter, can be used as a legal wedge to whatever, to vest you of money or put you and get you in trouble or anything like that. That doesn't work. Like, and that was one thing the lawyer who looked over my stuff, like, he chuckled at a lot of the fucking things in the agreement. That one specifically, he recommended, like, rewriting it to the company's favor, to be like, this is an absurdly, this isn't even just like, it's not just too broad, it's 100% open-ended. Anything you can take, like, anything that you can take and assign causality to, can there, retroactively be determined to be, to constitute disparagement, and absolutely. So, how were we disparaging them though? What were we saying about them? I wasn't.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And in fact, for clarity, neither of us has disparaged.
Do you remember getting shaken down by the car thieves?
I do.
That was the worst shakedown I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, eventually, they got their money. So, I mean, who are we to say?
No, they didn't. They got $50.
I know, they got $50.
Oh, you were upset about that, though.
Well, eventually, caved.
Do you know this story?
No, please tell it.
Okay, so when we were filming the Vice Guide to Everything, that was the name of the show, right? Mm-hmm. For MTV?
Yeah.
And it was great, as I recall.
That is kind of you. There were some the stories were fun. I really liked it. Like, that was the first time we worked together. I totally forgot that. We were in, because it was due to the embargo on the West Bank, like, it was difficult to get car parts, essentially, for any number of vehicles, for Palestinians to get car parts imported there. And so there was a really burgeoning trade in car theft and chop shops and stuff that would, specifically operate across the Israeli-Palestinian lines, where they'd go and steal Israeli cars, take them back to Palestine, pull the plates, sometimes chop them up, sometimes just drive the cars around with new plates and stuff on them, and that it was fulfilling, a need on a, political level, that there was a ramification, an unforeseen ramification of the embargo. And then there was the weird stuff where, like, some Israelis would pay, do an insurance scam and have Palestinians steal their car and stuff like that. Anyway, so we were there basically dealing with that, and we had a demonstration, I think is a polite way to refer to it, performed by some actual Palestinian car thieves who were paid an agreed upon fee of, I believe it was 600 shekels, 600 Israeli shekels.
I don't remember the amount.
I do, because that was the issue that was at stake, and provided their services, demonstrated how to steal a car, let me take some fun pictures where we were smashing up a car window, and then were paid and went off. And then I think a day later, when we were pretty much due to be heading back to the airport, they showed up, like, in total, like, goon squad mode, where there's like 3 of them in a pickup truck, kind of like they asked to
I think it was
to
a
meet
box
us.
truck, to be specific.
Oh, it was a box truck. Yeah, you're right. Asked to meet us on, like, a quiet street somewhere, via and we had this really young fixer who'd helped arrange it, named Hammy, right? Hamoudi, thank you.
Yeah.
And then George, who was the
George Azar, yeah.
amazing like veteran cameraman from like the war in Beirut and everything, who was just like, he was like the wavy gravy of cameramen. He was just this curly haired old stoner who nothing phased, was just like been through, because he'd been held hostage, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in the war. Yeah. And he had, I've experienced this, whereas like a lot of people I've met who lived through, like, you know, grew up in Sarajevo during the siege and stuff like that, are the cool, like the chillest people on earth. Like, it's like they got all their adrenaline taken care of, and now they're just like, nothing is a problem. That was what George made me think of.
But as you mentioned, it was an odd scenario in which we had an appointment to be shaken down, and we were
Oh, yeah,
we were
yeah.
aware of what was occurring.
They were like,
but we had to resolve this for the sake of Hamoudi.
The fixer. We weren't going to leave him behind, because otherwise he was going to have to go meet those guys on the empty street they wanted to meet at like, you know, 2:00 or whatever it was. So they pulled up in their box truck, and the crux of the argument was, we'd given them 600 shekels, which, what would you say that is? $100, 200?
Yeah.
It's less than $600, and they wanted $600. And so it started by being like, you know, well, we thought we were going to get $600 for this, and that had never been part of the agreement. And Jason conducted most of the negotiating. He's like, no, we did not agree to give you $600. We agreed to give you 600 shekels. And they're like, well, we think the services, you know, we think the thing we did for you is worth $600, not 600 shekels. And he's like, well, be that as it may, we agreed to give you 600 shekels, and we gave you 600 shekels, and we are not going to give you $600. And they're like, well, we'd really like $600 and not 600 shekels. And the whole time, so they're, you know, they're piled in their box truck, and it's a shakedown, and so we're waiting for them to get out of the car. And
by the way, it's worth mentioning that this guy looked like Vin Diesel.
he did look like Vin Diesel, like a little, like a slightly out of shape Vin Diesel, which is still maybe scarier.
Slightly out of shape, stoned Vin Diesel.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of weed smoking going on in that box truck before they got up. So anyway, like, the point of a shakedown is to, I mean, you know, the verb shakedown comes from the physical action of picking somebody up and shaking them until whatever you need falls out. And so we're waiting for them to get out of the truck and, like, you know, cause a ruckus. And I believe my position was, I was kind of like crouched and ready to run to the car to, like, I think I had George turn it on. I was like, I'm going to go get the car and I'm going to drive around and pick us up real quick. And I don't know what Hamoudi was planning to do, but I remember you saying after the fact that you were, and I could see that you were poised against the, against the curb, waiting for one of them to open the door, the car door, and start to get out, so that when they were halfway out of the car door, you could slam it shut and nail them with it.
Yeah.
And so
it's one of my fantasies.
Seeing you do that is actually one of my fantasies ever since that day. But so we're all, you know, our muscles are tensed. We're all ready to go into action, and they never get out of the car. The shakedown just, like, we just start circling past the same train station again and again and again. And we're like, well, we'd really like it if you gave us $600 and not 600 shekels. And we're like, well, again, we did not agree to give you $600 and not 600 shekels. And they're like, you know, what we did, we think was probably worth $600 and not 600 shekels. And we're just like, 30 minutes we sat there, just like completely muscles tense, just ready for it to pop off. And finally, I think I threw a $50 bill in the window. I was like, because we had to go somewhere.
Right.
Like,
no,
the
we had
shakedown.
To catch a plane.
We had to get to our flight.
Right.
The shakedown was taking too long.
I forgot that you provided the money. That you resolved it.
I found a $50 bill, but you were upset at me for that because you didn't want to cede any ground to them, which I respect. you kept to your principles. So the whole thing ended. It was the most anticlimactic shakedown I've ever been a part of. It was one of only a few shakedowns I've been a part of. And I remember us driving off, like, you know, all the lactic acid, like, just eating away the muscles from just, like, sitting there ready to do something for so long, and it just never happened. And George was the only one who hadn't been, like, he'd just been sitting in the car, I guess, probably smoking weed. And we got, like, so we're driving kind of, like, quietly, because we were all adrenalized and, like, trying to cool down and stuff like that. And George was just like, man, Hamoudi, those guys were kind of assholes, right? Just like,
yeah, but also, and I remember, I think probably relating my plan, which was to
Smash them.
to like kick the door on them as they escape. And
Yeah.
of course, George is the king of, again, modest one-upsmanship. He's like, yeah, I had to do that once.
Aw.
I think he's,
Of course.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what happened? He's like, oh, I was in Gaza and some local fighter got mad at something I was doing, and he had his gun and he jumped out to do it, and I had to kick it and smash it on his head, and I felt really bad about it.
I felt so bad for. Yeah.
And then he escaped in a gyrocopter, so he's getting beat on many levels.
You've still got a few years till you're George's age, so you can still get that gyrocopter, and I'm sure George owns a gyrocopter, and
Yeah.
with Palestinian plates.
Yeah.
Well, both. He can fly. Yeah, I never go through the checkpoints. I just. Oh, you have to. If you're gonna every bond, what is he? You have to be able to operate a submersible casket from You Only Live Twice.
Oh, I forgot about that. Submersible
That's gonna
casket.
that's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah.
So I don't think they made many of those.
God, that's from You Only Live Twice. It's
Remember,
not
that's how it
Thunderball?
begins.
Well, I mean, You Only Live Twice is basically Thunderball. What about in Thunderball? Did they do something different?
I can't remember.
And I thought it was a sub.
I don't think I've seen Thunderball.
Hmm.
I remember growing up hearing that there was a scene in Thunderball where they shoot a harpoon gun or a spear gun
Yeah.
through a man's testicles, and you can see the testicles come out. This is like one of those things like neighborhood kids told me, and I was so scared to see them because I was really I did not like horror movies. I was really touchy about like gore and stuff like that, and I was like, even the thought of that, I was like, I couldn't. I was like, man, how's that? I was like, and then I remember finding Thunderball at the rental place and being like, how's this PG if you can see a man's exposed testicles like out of the scrotum, like. But
I think they might have been confusing that with Faces of Death.
I don't think they had seen Thunderballs. I think they literally took.
Thunderballs?
I think they had seen a preview of Thunderballs that involved a spear gun.
Do you keep saying Thunderballs?
Yeah, I do. It's Thunderball.
Yeah.
Is it Thunderball?
Thunderball. Yeah.
As I said, I haven't seen it, and it's really Thunderball. God damn.
Singular.
I've been calling it that for. Oh, I wish I could remember the other thing.
Thunderballs was the porn parody.
You know what I realized? I've had mixed up my entire life, like for 25 years. I have had Noel and Liam Gallagher backwards, and what's amazing, I just learned this like 2 weeks ago. I've been calling each one the wrong name, and yet somehow I have them exactly right, just with the wrong names. Like, I don't know, like, I'm still trying to work out how that happened, but it was seriously like through the looking glass, like my world. I think I might have texted you. I
wasn't me.
texted. I texted I think Andy Capper about that. It's just like, talk about life altering shit. I should see Thunderball.
You should. It's
Yeah.
good. On that note, let's wrap up. Also, my battery's about to die. It turns out it's not plugged in. But Thomas Morton. What's your middle name?
Wilson.
Thomas Wilson Morton. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. What's your middle name?
Todd.
Jason Todd Mojica.
Jason Todd Mojica. What about you,
I
Eric?
must have heard that at one point, but did not know that.
And what's yours?
That's funny.
Eric.
Andrew. That's my dad's name.
Eric
Where
Andrew.
does Todd come from?
And what's your
Don't dodge the
mother's
maiden
name?
Golden. Goulden.
Ooh, that's a nice one. Of the golden mustard people?
Nope.
No, okay.
I mean,
I'm not
maybe
from the
in
Morton
some
salts.
unknown distant way, but
Yeah.
not really, no.
Okay, I got the same thing going with the Morton Salt Company.
Oh, yeah.
What about
good
your
point.
What about your social?
You know, you can find most of people's social, like 5 of the how many digits is it? 7. You can find 5 of the 7 digits on LexisNexis. Isn't that nuts?
It's 9, right? 9
It's
digits. Yeah.
is it 9
Yeah,
digits?
yeah.
You can find a lot of it. You can find like 5 of those digits for anybody if you have their name and their birthday.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Well, Chicago Sun-Times used to run this game where they just like printed social security numbers, and you just have to look to see if you won, like if it was your social security
Really?
number. So
Oh, you know what? Have you seen that? You know that leak that happened recently, the Equifax leak?
yeah,
Have you checked if
No,
your number
no.
was in there?
No,
I
no.
did. I got $130 coming to me.
Oh, wow.
Fucking psyched. Go
I need
go
to
buy
do
some
that.
groceries.
Eric, you should check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure should.
I highly recommend everybody check it out. So you avoided answering where Todd came from? Did it come from the classic
Oh.
George Carlin bit about boys' names?
Oh no, I don't know where it came from. Oh, and you know what? I never answered your question. I have 7% on the battery here. But your
You've got 7.
question about whether or not you're hard to work with. I mean, sure, you're hard to work with. Yeah, I'll say yes. That's the short answer. But the longer answer is that kind of what you were getting at before is that you are legitimately interested in each of these topics, and you're not just there ticking boxes. So it was always enjoyable, and you were always a very active, enthusiastic participant, and you were actually interested in trying to find something out, not just figure out what you could get away with saying or how little work you could get away with doing.
Well, that was, and I always thought that was a thing that Vice was great at weeding people out with, which you see that a lot with. I never worked with other hosts, so I never get to see like how they acted, but like they were definitely like, you were a great producer. I worked with a few others who were like just fantastic at stuff for the very reason that I thought made a good producer, which was that they were excited about the story, interested in things, like actually wanted to see it. It wasn't just like, oh, this will make, this will get good ratings, this will be a bomb, like a big bombshell fucking story or whatever, and then we're actually, having fun out there in the field, and like a lot of time it didn't feel like a job, like, which it wasn't for me because I didn't have to carry a camera or anything like that. I just walked around and talked to people.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing.
I'm going to stop recording because I'm afraid the computer's about to die.
No, no.
So
Yep. It was a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Yeah.
Any of our listeners kind enough, we would greatly appreciate it if you would give us 5 stars on the iTunes. I've heard that that's helpful.
yeah, you don't
please.
even have to listen to give us 5 stars. It's good.
That's
But,
absolutely true. And I think if you subscribe, that would be very nice. And anything you want to share or post about us on Instagram, Twitter, and what have you, letting people know that the show exists and that they should listen to it would be much appreciated.